Have you ever experienced a moment where your faith was utterly transformed by a single conversation? Imagine being in the presence of someone who has embodied Jesus for 6 years, only to discover that everything you believed about divine love was incomplete. What would you do if you realized you had spent decades striving to earn a love that was inherently yours all along? Today you will discover how an intimate encounter between Jonathan Roumie, the actor who portrays Jesus in The Chosen, and Mel Gibson, director of The Passion of the Christ, unveiled a truth about Christ that brought one of Hollywood's most renowned filmmakers to tears. But what precisely did Jonathan articulate that was capable of shattering decades of guilt and intense spiritual struggle? And why did this revelation forever alter the way Mel perceives his own spiritual journey with God? Prepare yourself for a conversation that may well profoundly transform your faith. The golden light of the Texan late afternoon streams through the enormous glass windows of Angel Studio's studio, casting golden reflections on the professional equipment strewn across the spacious conference room. Mel Gibson walks slowly amidst the cameras and sets, his seasoned hands delicately touching the historical costumes meticulously hung. At 68 years old, the veteran director bears broad shoulders slightly stooped by the weight of decades in the film industry, gray hair combed back, and piercing blue eyes that assess every detail of the production. The atmosphere still hums with the creative energy from an intense day of filming for the fifth season of The Chosen, with scripts strewn across tables and equipment bearing witness to the arduous work of a dedicated team. I've never seen a biblical production with such meticulous attention to historical detail, Mel murmurs, observing the elaborate sets. This is unlike anything I've ever witnessed in Hollywood. The heavy wooden door swings open, and Jonathan Roumie enters the room with measured steps and a presence that immediately transforms the room's energy. At 51 years old, he carries unmistakable elements of his portrayal of Jesus. Long brown hair cascading over his shoulders, a meticulously sculpted beard, framing a serene face marked by years of portraying profound emotions. His medium height and slender yet defined build reflect the discipline required for long filming days, while his delicate hands move naturally, as if still blessing unseen multitudes. His dark brown eyes seem to bear the spiritual weight of one who has spent over 6 years daily inhabiting the most sacred role in history, creating a fascinating duality between the ordinary man and the divine symbol he represents for millions. Mr. Gibson, it is an honor to welcome you to our studio, Jonathan said, extending his hand with genuine humility. I understand you're interested in learning about our creative process and perhaps discussing a potential collaboration. Mel firmly shakes Jonathan's hand and immediately discerns something different. It's not the calculated handshake typical of Hollywood, but the sincere touch of someone authentic to their core. The texture of his skin reveals years of arduous work, while the controlled strength suggests a personality that naturally balances power with gentleness. Mel's eyes scrutinize Jonathan's face, searching for traces of the public persona so often donned by actors, yet finding only a disarming transparency that prompted him to reevaluate his own emotional defenses. The silence, which lingered for several seconds, was not uncomfortable. Rather, it was imbued with a spiritual energy, both recognized without explicit acknowledgement, akin to ancient souls reuniting after a protracted separation. The privilege is wholly mine, Jonathan, Mel responded, a palpable sincerity evident in his subtly tremulous voice. I have been closely following your work on The Chosen, and I must confess it stands apart from any other portrayal of Christ I've encountered. Jonathan subtly gestured toward the brown leather armchairs circularly arranged in the room's center, a configuration designed to dismantle hierarchies and foster intimate discourse among individuals seeking authentic rapport. The chairs evinced constant wear, minor scuffs on the leather, cushions subtly misshapen from innumerable creative sessions, and cup rings attesting to protracted discussions on faith and art. The natural light imbued the space with an almost cinematic quality, with golden shafts dancing amidst motes of dust, transmuting that functional area into something sacrosanct and conducive to profound revelations. Both instinctively perceived, they were on the verge of commencing a dialogue that would transcend professional confines and delve into unexplored spiritual domains within their personal lives. In what particular way is it different, if I might inquire? Jonathan queried, inclining slightly forward, his mien reflecting genuine curiosity. I'm always interested in the perspective of other filmmakers who have explored spiritual themes in their works. Mel settled himself comfortably and let his gaze sweep over the surroundings once more, taking in the minutiae that underscored the gravitas of the production. Storyboards adorning the walls, meticulously stacked historical research tomes, ancient maps of the Holy Land, and evocative photographs of authentic Middle Eastern locales. Each element spoke volumes of an obsessive devotion to historical and emotional veracity, a pursuit he himself had undertaken during the Passion of the Christ, but which appeared to have attained an even more refined articulation in Jonathan's oeuvre. The prevailing sensation was akin to being within a spiritual crucible where faith transmutes into art through creative processes that honor both the divine magnitude and the poignant human vulnerability inherent in the narrative of Jesus Christ. More human, more accessible, Mel articulated, carefully choosing each word. In the Passion of the Christ, I focused on the physical suffering and spiritual agony, but you've managed to bring something I've striven for decades to capture. Jonathan tilted his head, his dark eyes conveying genuine interest as his hands rested serenely on his knees, a posture indicative of years of spiritual discipline honed through constant meditation and prayer. His expression blended intellectual curiosity with a profound serenity that radiated from within, creating an energetic field conducive to disclosure even during initial encounters. His bearing, upright yet relaxed, attentive without tension, suggested someone who had mastered the art of being fully present in each moment, unburdened by the superfluous weight of past or future anxieties. A timeless quality permeated his presence, naturally decelerating the ambiance and allowing superficial conversations to evolve into profound discussions about fundamental existential questions. And what precisely would that be, this quality we've managed to capture? Jonathan inquired, his voice soft yet penetrating. I am genuinely intrigued to understand your perspective on our work and artistic approach. Mel drew a deep breath, an inexplicable wave of emotion rising from his chest toward his throat, a visceral reaction that caught him entirely off guard, considering he was merely discussing cinematic techniques. His decades of experience had instilled in him the ability to maintain emotional composure in professional settings, yet something in Jonathan's tranquil presence imperceptibly dissolved his customary defenses. Words seemed poised to well up from a place deeper than his analytical mind, as if his soul recognized a rare opportunity to share truths that seldom find expression in conventional Hollywood discourse. The golden light intensified gradually, creating an intimate atmosphere conducive to personal revelations, typically safeguarded within the secret vault of the human heart. Intimacy, Mel uttered, his voice slightly tremulous from the unexpected emotion. The sense that Jesus was a real person, with a genuine sense of humor, authentic friendships, and moments of human doubt. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, but charged with a palpable spiritual energy that filled every inch of the space with an almost tangible presence of something greater than their individual personalities. Jonathan remained motionless for seconds, allowing the words to fully resonate before formulating a response that would honor the emotional vulnerability he had witnessed. His eyes carefully studied Mel's expression, recognizing signs of someone struggling internally with deep emotions, stirred by seemingly simple conversations about cinema. His experience portraying Jesus for over 6 years had taught Jonathan to recognize moments when people are ready to share deeper aspects of their spiritual journeys, and he perceived that Mel was approaching a crucial moment of emotional openness. Can I be completely honest about something I rarely discuss publicly? Jonathan said, leaning further forward. How do you manage to maintain that authentic intimacy during years of portrayal without completely losing yourself in the character? The word struck Mel as a question he had silently posed to himself throughout his entire career, especially during the intense months of production for The Passion of the Christ. When he struggled to balance personal faith with the artistic demands of portraying divine sacrifice cinematographically, The question revealed a profound understanding of the unique challenges faced by artists who explore spiritual themes, recognizing the fine line between divine inspiration and personal projection that can be crossed without conscious perception. Mel felt his hands tremble slightly as memories of his turbulent spiritual journey surfaced. Moments of doubt, periods of estrangement from faith, scandals that nearly destroyed his career and family, and particularly the constant struggle to find authentic redemption amidst the chaos of a life under the relentless glare of media scrutiny. "I completely lost myself in him, Jonathan," Mel admitted, his voice cracking, "and it was simultaneously the best and most terrifying experience of my entire life." Jonathan watched as tears began to well in Mel's eyes and immediately recognized the familiar territory of authentic spiritual vulnerability he had witnessed countless times during his years portraying Christ. His own journey through the emotional ebbs and flows of living out his faith in Jesus daily equips him with profound compassion for others who have wrestled with similar questions of identity, faith, and purpose within intense spiritual contexts. The way Mel gripped his trembling hands and struggled to maintain his composure revealed a man bearing significant emotional weight that had likely never found a safe space to be fully expressed. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably, as if a divine presence were gently descending upon them, preparing the ground for conversations that would utterly transcend professional expectations and enter the sacred territory of healing and spiritual revelation. "Mel, may I share something with you?" Jonathan said in a gentle yet firm voice. "I grew up a cultural Catholic in New York, but Jesus was distant to me, merely a figure in stained glass until I landed this role." Jonathan's words forged an instant bridge of identification that Mel felt resonate profoundly with his own complicated and often conflicted experience of Catholic faith over decades, lived under intense public scrutiny. The unadorned yet profound honesty in Jonathan's admission about his own spiritual journey stripped away any pretense or defensive posturing that might have existed between them, creating a safe space for mutual vulnerability rarely found in professional Hollywood encounters. Mel realized he was in the presence of someone who genuinely understood the unique challenges of striving to live an authentic faith while navigating the complexities of a public career, especially when that career involves interpreting or portraying sacred figures who carry immense emotional and spiritual weight for millions. The sensation of finally finding someone who could comprehend his deepest internal struggles brought a surge of relief mingled with nervous anticipation about where this conversation might emotionally lead them. "Jonathan, I've spent 40 years trying to earn God's love through my art," Mel confessed, his voice choked with emotion. "But I always felt as if I were failing, as if I were never good or holy enough to merit forgiveness." A week later, an October evening in Manhattan carried the distinctive chill that portends a rigorous winter, as Mel carefully ascended the 3 flights of stairs in the pre-war building where Jonathan resided when not filming in Dallas. The Upper West Side apartment was surprisingly modest for an actor from the most successful series in Christian streaming history, immediately revealing that Jonathan lives by values that transcend the typical materialism of Hollywood stardom. Exposed brick walls told tales of decades of previous tenants, while tall windows with original wooden frames offered a partial view of the Hudson River shimmering under the city's nightlights. The narrow hallway echoed with Mel's footsteps as he carried a bottle of red wine and the anticipation of a conversation promising to be even more profound than their initial encounter at the Texan studio. "Mel, what a joy to have you here in my home," Jonathan said, opening the door with a warm smile that instantly dissipated any tension from the exhausting day. "Please come in and make yourself completely at home." As Jonathan opened the door, Mel immediately noticed the physical transformation. Without the Jesus characterization, the actor appeared younger, more vulnerable, and profoundly human, dressed in faded jeans and a gray wool sweater that revealed an ordinary man leading a simple life away from the limelight. The apartment, in every meticulously chosen detail, revealed the soul of its inhabitant. Orthodox icons adorned the walls with silent reverence. Books on theology and spirituality were stacked high on makeshift shelves crafted from planks and bricks. And in a corner of the living room stood a small chapel, complete with lit candles, a dark wooden rosary, and an image of Christ clearly used for daily prayer. The aroma of homemade lasagna mingled with the subtle scent of gently burning incense, creating an atmosphere that blended comforting domesticity with the contemplative sacredness of an urban monastery. Soft lighting emanated primarily from vintage lamps and strategically placed candles, eschewing fluorescent lights that might disrupt the intimate magic of the ambiance. "This is real, isn't it?" Mel murmured, absorbing every detail with escalating admiration. "You truly live your faith beyond the cameras and the Hollywood glare." Jonathan chuckled genuinely as he hung Mel's coat on the artisanal hook behind the door. A simple gesture that revealed authentic hospitality was second nature to him, not a calculated performance designed to impress a celebrated visitor. His movements around the small American kitchen are efficient yet relaxed, characteristic of someone who has found peace in simple domestic tasks and discovered that preparing meals can be a form of contemplative prayer when undertaken with the correct intention. The apartment tells the story of a man who chose substance over ostentation, meaning over status, revealing priorities shaped over years, embodying a character who taught humanity true values through lived example. The walls display personal photographs interspersed with images from the chosen sets, moments with the cast, a college graduation, and several off-Broadway theater photos that attest to a long artistic journey predating his current fame. "Welcome to my real life, then," Jonathan replied, gesturing towards the cozy living room. "Coffee, wine, or something stronger to go with the dinner I prepared especially for our conversation?" Mel explores the space with growing fascination, pausing before the improvised chapel where she senses an almost palpable presence of decades of sincere prayers ascended from that sacred nook of the urban apartment. The altar's deliberate simplicity contrasts dramatically with the opulence of many renowned churches. Yet it carries a spiritual authenticity that prompts Mel to question her own relationship with religious pomp versus genuine devotion. Small offerings left at the foot of the image of Christ, fresh flowers, handwritten prayers on scraps of paper, photographs of loved ones, reveal that this space serves far beyond mere decoration, functioning as an active spiritual hub in Jonathan's daily life. The respectful silence Mel maintains before the altar does not go unnoticed by Jonathan, who recognizes someone familiar with the sacred language, even when expressed in unconventional forms. "You truly live this here too," Mel observed, delicately touching one of the lit candles. "Jesus was not merely a role you played, but a presence that inhabited your personal life." Jonathan emerges from the kitchen carrying 2 plates of steaming lasagna, filling the air with the aromas of fresh basil, melted cheese, and homemade tomato sauce seasoned with a maternal love he learned during the quarantine when filming abruptly halted. On a small table made of reclaimed wood, he also places an open bottle of red wine, allowing it to breathe, and 2 simple yet elegant glasses that belonged to his late Italian grandmother. The table was set with studied simplicity, linen napkins, votive candles casting a golden glow, a complete absence of electronics or distractions that could impinge upon the intimacy of the conversation they both knew would be profound and transformative. The ritual of sharing a home-cooked meal cultivated an atmosphere of communion that transcended a mere dinner between colleagues, laying a sacred foundation for the vulnerabilities about to be bared. "Mel, can I confess something I've never publicly admitted?" Jonathan said, pouring wine with slightly trembling hands. "For the first 2 years of The Chosen, I was pretending half the time that I knew what I was doing." Jonathan's words forged an atmosphere of radical honesty, which Mel recognized as rare territory even within the intimate circles of Hollywood, where admitting insecurity or incompetence can be construed as a fatal professional weakness. Jonathan cut a piece of lasagna but didn't eat it, his hands trembling as he wrestled internally with the decision to share the more vulnerable facets of his artistic and spiritual journey. The golden candlelight danced across his face, creating a play of shadows that unveiled an emotional depth rarely glimpsed during public interviews or media appearances. Mel ceased eating entirely, recognizing she was about to witness a momentous confession that demanded her undivided attention and silent reverence. "I knew the lines, understood basic theology, could access the necessary emotions for scenes," Jonathan continued, his voice growing softer. But spiritually, Mel, I was still lost. Still that failed waiter, trying to pretend I understood divine mysteries. The confession struck Mel like a bolt of instant recognition, surfacing her own memories of moments during the production of The Passion of the Christ, when she secretly questioned if she was spiritually or artistically qualified to approach such sacred material. Jonathan rose abruptly from the table and walked to the window, which offered a partial view of Manhattan's shimmering lights, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture that betrayed years of accumulated tension from bearing the weight of portraying the most significant figure in human history. The silence stretching between them was not uncomfortable, but charged with an electric energy that precedes momentous revelations. Like the moments before storms that promise to cleanse entire emotional landscapes. Mel contemplated Jonathan's profile, silhouetted against the city lights, perceiving a man valiantly confronting inner demons that scant few would possess the fortitude to face openly. "What truly altered everything for you?" Mel inquired, her voice gentle yet imbued with a palpable urgency. "What pivotal moment or profound experience transmuted mere pretense into the authentic faith I now perceive so clearly in your gaze?" Jonathan slowly turns from the window, his eyes glistening with unshed tears that capture and reflect the golden candlelight like distant stars bearing tales of suffering and redemption. His breath deepens and steadies, as if preparing to plunge into emotional depths seldom navigated in casual conversation, even with close friends. The apartment seems to constrict around them, forming a bubble of intimacy where profound truths can be shared without fear of judgment or subsequent exploitation. Mel feels his heart quicken in anticipation, recognizing the signs of someone about to impart an experience that has fundamentally altered their understanding of self and the divine. "The third season," Jonathan said, returning to the table but remaining standing. "We filmed a crucifixion scene for an entire week, spending 8 hours daily on the cross, and by the fourth day, something within me fractured." The words carry the gravitas of an experience that transcends mere acting and ventures into mystical territory, where the lines between performance and spiritual reality completely dissolve. Jonathan sits down slowly, as if a sudden movement might break a sacred spell he is weaving through his carefully chosen words. His hands visibly tremble now as he lightly touches the wine glass without drinking, as if alcohol might interfere with the clarity needed to articulate an experience that defies conventional language. Mel leans forward instinctively, recognizing that he is about to hear a testament to an authentic encounter with the sacred, one that few humans experience directly. "I was physically exhausted, emotionally drained, and suddenly it wasn't Jonathan Roumie on the cross anymore," he continued, his voice broken by emotion. "For 3 hours I felt every betrayal, every abandonment, every moment of pain Jesus experienced, but also the unconditional love for every person who rejected him." The intensity of the revelation creates a sacred silence that envelops the apartment like a protective shroud, isolating them from the outside world where such an experience might be diminished or ridiculed by skeptics. Tears begin to stream down Mel's face as he processes the implications of what Jonathan is describing. Not an actor's hallucination, but a legitimate mystical encounter that has utterly transformed his understanding of divinity and humanity. Jonathan buries his face in trembling hands, evidently grappling with a torrent of overwhelming emotions that well up anew whenever he recollects the pivotal, transformative experience that reshaped his entire being. The apartment appears to throb with a palpable spiritual energy, as if a divine presence were softly alighting upon them in response to the profound candor being unveiled. "You know what utterly shattered me," Jonathan uttered, his gaze fixed on Mel's eyes glistening with tears. "It was filming a scene where Jesus embraces children, because it dawned on me that I was forfeiting the opportunity to love, as Jesus loves, completely, fearlessly, unconditionally, unburdened by the conditionalities I had internalized from my absent father." The hour is 2 in the morning as Jonathan and Mel convene at the side entrance of the majestic St. Patrick's Cathedral, their forms starkly outlined against the formidable Gothic edifice that looms as a spiritual sentinel in the slumbering heart of Manhattan. The perpetually wakeful city murmurs around them on the chilly October wind. bearing the faint echoes of sirens, car horns, and the hurried footsteps of nocturnal wayfarers. Yet the cathedral endures as an oasis of hallowed quietude amidst the incessant urban tumult. Jonathan employs a distinct key on the antiquated lock of the side portal, his precise motions betraying an intimate familiarity with this nocturnal rite which has become an indispensable facet of his spiritual regimen over the past 2 years. Mel's gaze nervously sweeps the surroundings, feeling akin to a confederate in a clandestine scheme, yet simultaneously anticipating an encounter with the numinous for which her famished soul has yearned through decades of unfulfilled spiritual quest. "How did you secure entry at this pre-dawn hour?" Mel inquired in a reverent whisper as Jonathan meticulously worked the lock. "Father Murphy granted me special dispensation after The Chosen became a global phenomenon," Jonathan replied. "He stated I required a sanctuary to commune with Jesus beyond the confines of my profession." The ponderous oak portal swung open soundlessly, revealing the cathedral's interior, shrouded in majestic gloom, punctuated only by a handful of votive candles that shimmered like distant stars within the side chapels, casting ephemeral shadows across the colossal columns that soared skyward toward the unseen nocturnal firmament. The silence proved so profound that Mel could discern her own heartbeat reverberating in her ears like a primal drumbeat, beating out a cadence of trepidation interwoven with profound reverence before the sacred essence that permeated every fiber of that hallowed space, consecrated by decades of fervent supplications. Their footsteps resonate softly on the polished marble as they follow Jonathan through the side corridor, passing by statues of saints who seem to observe them with silent benevolence in the gilded twilight. The air is redolent with a subtle aroma of ancient incense mingled with beeswax and aged wood, creating an atmosphere that instantly transports visitors beyond terrestrial concerns towards the realm of the eternal and transcendent. "Wow, the presence here is almost palpable," Mel murmured, absorbing the majesty of the expansive space which seems to vibrate with accumulated spiritual energy. "I can feel the weight of all the prayers that have ascended from this place throughout the years." Jonathan guides Mel through the main corridor to a small side chapel dedicated to the Sacred Heart, where an image of Christ with an exposed heart glows softly in the golden light of candles lit by the faithful the previous day. This intimate space within the cathedral's vastness offers a more conducive environment for profound conversation, with ancient wooden pews burnished by generations of kneeling supplicants who sought grace and absolution. The chapel walls feature delicate frescoes depicting moments from the Passion of Christ, each brushstroke imbued with artistic devotion that transcends mere ornamentation and enters the realm of visual prayer. Jonathan kneels on the worn red velvet prie-dieu, and Mel instinctively emulates him, both positioning themselves before the sacred image as humble supplicants, seeking divine wisdom for the questions that plague their souls. "This is where everything changed for me, Mel," Jonathan said, his voice imbued with reverent emotion. "Where I finally comprehended what it truly means to follow Christ beyond the cameras and the glare of fame." Jonathan's words resonate softly within the chapel, creating concentric circles of meaning that penetrate deeply into Mel's consciousness, stirring memories of her own tumultuous spiritual quest, which had encompassed moments of intense faith interspersed with periods of devastating doubt. The image of Christ before them seems to pulse with an intrinsic life in the flickering candlelight, its painted eyes conveying infinite compassion, embracing both sinners and saints without distinction or judgment. Mel feels waves of emotion welling up from a profound place within her chest as she contemplates the exposed Sacred Heart, a potent symbol of divine love, offering itself vulnerable and open to a wounded and lost humanity. The hallowed silence enveloping the chapel allows both men to inwardly process the profound spiritual weight of the moment, laying the emotional groundwork for revelations that will fundamentally reshape their understanding of faith, forgiveness, and redemption. "Tell me about this transformation," Mel requested, his voice thick with burgeoning emotion. "I need to know how you found the peace I perceive radiating from your soul." Jonathan inhales deeply, and his shoulders relax slightly as he accesses memories of an experience that completely redefined his spiritual and artistic existence 3 years ago in this very hallowed sanctuary. his hands clasped in prayer as his gaze fixes upon the image of Christ, as if he were reliving a moment of divine communion that forever altered the trajectory of his life. The vulnerability in his posture reveals a man unafraid to share the most intimate facets of his spiritual journey, recognizing that radical authenticity is sometimes necessary to pierce hearts hardened by disillusionment and suffering. Mel observes every nuance of Jonathan's facial expression, recognizing signs of one poised to unlock the innermost vault of his soul, to unveil the spiritual treasure forged through genuine wrestling with the ultimate questions of human existence. It was exactly 3 years ago, Jonathan began, his voice slightly trembling. I was going through a terrible crisis because The Chosen had become a global phenomenon, and people would stop me in the street, calling me Jesus, some even kneeling and asking for blessings. Jonathan's confession about the overwhelming burden of spiritual renown resonates deeply with Mel, who experienced similar pressure during and after the release of the Timampinayu. The Passion of the Christ, when he was simultaneously lauded and crucified by the global media. The paradox of being revered for portraying a sacred figure while grappling internally with one's own imperfections and doubts creates a psychological tension few can comprehend or endure without devastating emotional repercussions. Jonathan continues to gaze fixedly at the image of Christ while articulating an experience he seldom shares publicly, his fingers intertwined in prayer so tightly that his knuckles turn white from the pressure. The atmosphere in the chapel becomes even more charged with spiritual energy, as if a divine presence were gently descending upon them in response to the radical honesty being offered as a sacred sacrifice upon the altar of human vulnerability. It was surreal and terrifying at the same time, Mel, Jonathan continued, tears beginning to well up in his eyes. How do you separate the actor from the character when the character is Christ himself, and millions of people place their spiritual hopes in your portrayal? Mel felt a tightening in his chest as memories of his own experience with religious fame inundated his consciousness. Fan letters pleading for prayers, fierce theological criticisms from scholars, personal attacks from groups who deemed his portrayal of the Passion blasphemous or inappropriate. The weight of artistically portraying Christ carries a responsibility that transcends entertainment and ventures into sacred territory where missteps can affect the faith of millions worldwide. Jonathan retrieved a handkerchief from his pocket and discreetly dabbed away tears that had begun to stream down his face. A simple gesture that revealed the emotional depth beneath the public mask of serenity he maintained during media appearances. The golden candlelight danced across their faces, creating a play of shadows that intensified the visual drama of the moment as two souls connected through shared experiences of authentic spiritual struggle. I came here one night, just like this, Jonathan said, gesturing to the sacred space around them. I was desperate, feeling like I was losing my true identity amidst the public persona I had unwittingly created. Jonathan's brutal honesty about his spiritual identity crisis forged an instant bridge of empathy, allowing Mel to lower the last emotional defenses he had maintained to shield himself from judgment or misunderstanding. Tears began to well up in Mel's eyes as he recognized a reflection of his own struggles in the courageous confession he was witnessing in that sacred moment. Jonathan leaned closer to the image of Christ, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper that compelled Mel to draw physically nearer to catch every precious word of the revelation being shared. The air in the chapel seemed to thicken with a tangible divine presence, as if unseen angels were gathering to bear witness to an authentic communion between two wounded souls seeking healing through mutual vulnerability. I knelt right here and said, Jesus, if you are real, if all of this makes sense, I need to know. Jonathan continued, his voice cracking. Not as a famous actor, not as a public symbol, but as Jonathan, the broken man you chose for this impossible role. Jonathan's account of his desperate prayer reverberates through the chapel, an echo of all earnest supplications ever offered from that hallowed ground by generations of congregants seeking genuine communion with the divine amidst the tempests of human existence. Mel closes his eyes, allowing the words to permeate his very being, recognizing the familiar language of one who has exhausted his own means and fully yielded to divine grace. The image of Christ before them seems to emanate an otherworldly warmth that not only thaws the chapel's cold air, but also softens hearts calloused by disappointment and decades of accrued spiritual anguish. Jonathan remains silent for extended moments, allowing the gravity of his disclosure to be completely assimilated before recounting the answer he received on that transformative night. "And then I understood something that changed everything forever," Jonathan said, looking directly into Mel's tear-filled eyes. "Jesus did not come to be worshipped from afar as an inaccessible deity, but to be intimately emulated as a tangible embodiment of unconditional love." Jonathan's concluding words strike Mel like a spiritual bolt, instantly illuminating decades of theological confusion and personal struggle with concepts of worthiness, merit, and redemption that had plagued his complex Catholic faith. Tears begin to stream freely down Mel's face as profound comprehension floods his consciousness. He had spent an entire lifetime attempting to earn God's love through artistic suffering and intense spiritual struggle, when he should have simply accepted the unconditional love already freely bestowed. Jonathan extends his hand and gently touches Mel's shoulder in a gesture of fraternal compassion that shatters the final emotional defenses, allowing decades of repressed pain to flow freely in a sacred catharsis that promised to transform both their lives forever. The chapel fills with a palpable divine presence as the two men experience an authentic communion that transcends words and ventures into mystical realms where true healing occurs through shared vulnerability. "Mel, God is not waiting for you to be worthy," Jonathan said, his voice firm yet gentle, laden with spiritual authority forged through genuine suffering. "He awaits your acceptance that you are already unconditionally loved, precisely as you are in this very moment, with all your imperfections and shortcomings." If the narrative of Jonathan Roumie and Mel Gibson resonated deeply with your heart and revealed to you that Christ's love demands not perfection, but simply acceptance, be sure to subscribe, like, and leave a comment, and share with me. Have you ever perceived yourself as undeserving of divine love, only to later realize He was by your side throughout? Please share your insights in the comments section. May divine blessings guide your path.